Yes.
Okay.
I cannot do it. Yeah, so I might have stopped. Shall I? Did I stop?
I was the one who stopped. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
the screen sharing.
Okay, so hello. We are about to begin our today's meeting. And okay, just let me. Okay, so warm greetings from Adyar to all sisters and brothers that are joining us today from all over the world and all over India also. Thank you for your lovely presence. And we welcome you to this public lecture of our dear brother Charlton Jules Romero, better known as Chally Romero, entitled Thought as a Cornerstone of Character in the Digital Age. This is a talk organized by Pragya CS Studio as a part of an effort to take the opportunities given by this pandemic to spread theosophical teachings. Few requests to everyone is to keep your microphone muted during the talk. And if you have any question, query, comment that you want to share with us, kindly note them down and ask at the end of the talk, or you also can use the chat box to write any comment that you want to convey to our lecturer. And we will take them up after the talk. Thank you for your cooperation in this sense also. And as always, we are going to start our gathering with the universal invocation, indicating the unity in diversity and oneness of life, followed by few moments of silence. So I request you to sit in a comfortable position, and if you want, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes or whatever, however you feel more comfortable, we will say the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Well, now it is my big pleasure to introduce our today's speaker. Charlton Jules Romero is a lawyer and professor. He is currently the National President and General Secretary of the Theosophical Society in the Philippines, as well as the Vice President of the TS in Philippines and the TS Indo-Pacific Federation, He also serves as a chairman of the World Golden Link College and TOS Philippines. Since the beginning of the pandemic, he and his wonderful team from the Theosophical Society in the Philippines started a wonderful work of spreading theosophy using the technological online tools by weekly theosophical lectures, allowing people from all corners to come together. This initiative has for sure inspired so many of us, not only to pursue similar activities, but also it has allowed many people around the world to learn and enjoy engaging and thought-provoking talks on a wide variety of theosophical and spiritual subjects for almost 1 year now. We thank Bro Chally for that inspiration and wish the best to continue the remarkable work that is being done. Likewise, during the last international convention, Chally was a part of the coordination team of the convention, doing a wonderful work for a very successful 144 international convention and the first one online. With no further ado, I welcome Brother Chally, who will explore how thought can provide direction, foundation, and substance to character on an individual and collective level in the digital age. So please, Brother Chally, welcome to this meeting. So happy to have you here. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much, Sister Catalina. And thank you also to Brother Shikhar for the invitation. I am doubly honored to be here with you. I refer and say doubly honored because some of you may be aware that the first time we had to cancel at the last minute because of some emergency brought about by this devastating pandemic. But here we are today, and I am honored to be with you and equally humbled to share some of my thoughts on this particular topic. Now, when the invitation was extended by Brother Shikhar, I was a bit hesitant, not only because of my workload and schedule, but because some of you are well aware that in the Philippine section, we have other several, what I may call heavy hitters, the dyed-in-the-wool lecturers on various theosophical topics. And but I am aware of the task being done by Shikhar and Catalina through Pragya CS Studio in bringing about various theosophical knowledge on several media platforms. And my mentors in the Philippine section has said that as part of the theosophical work, it involves study, meditation, and service. And study includes sharing what you know, even whatever little that you know, because through study and echoing what you studied and maybe teaching it, then you are propagating and encouraging further exploration of the ageless wisdom. So I accepted the invitation, but yet without a topic in mind. So I told Shikhar, okay, I'll get back to you with a topic. So I slept over it and still no topic in mind. But when I was having breakfast and I was holding my mug, my cup, I found the answer regarding my topic in the mug. But let me first share my screen. Okay. So when I was holding my mug, this would be the side that would be facing you, not me, the drinker. And there's a commemorative mug celebrating one of our regional conventions in the Philippines, the VISMIN Federation Convention, that is Visayas and Mindanao Federation. But the more significant part of this mug was on the other side, facing me while I was drinking. And this is one of those popular adages which can no longer be attributed to anyone. And most of you are well familiar with this adage about developing thoughts or watching our thoughts, for they become words. Choose your words wisely, for they become actions. Understand your actions, for they become habits. Study your habits, they become your character. Ultimately, they become your destiny. So at the last, it tells us to have a great life with a destiny of your choice. So going through these iterations, we could summarize that the choice of thought ultimately determines your destiny and not only your character. Now, I went back to Shikar and presented to him the topic, and later on I added the development of character in the digital age. And some of you may ask, we're already into the ageless wisdom. Why regress back to a blink of an eye, the digital age, and maybe this coming post-digital age, when we're in fact, when this is just a small part of eternity, and we are already studying the ageless wisdom. So later on, we will juxtapose this time of ours, this digital and the coming post-digital age. In fact, we are already in the beginnings of the post-digital age and how it affects thought and character. Now, I will have to beg your indulgence as I am not really adept with slides and all of these technology. Usually, I just work behind the scenes, as Shikar is familiar with. So, this is the basis of the inspiration for today's topic. And first, let us define why we refer to thought as the cornerstone of character. And some of us, well, with this, with the technology in architecture, engineering, and new ways of building, cornerstones may no longer be relevant in today's building age. But once upon a time, a rough rock was hewn and cut into perfect angles so as to become the cornerstone of a structure. In this image of ours, we find the cornerstone right there in the middle bottom of this fence, this stone fence. So after hewing and cutting what is to be a cornerstone, we place it where we want the structure to begin. And the cornerstone provides the direction on where the subsequent building stones will lead to. You orient, the cornerstone orients the direction of the rest of the building. Not only does it provide direction, it also provides the foundation of the structure that we are building. So much so that if the cornerstone is removed, we might see the structure topple over and fall apart. So similarly, we refer to thought as a cornerstone, pointing to us the direction that we want our character to take. And it also provides the foundation or the strength in building this character of ours. So by way of brief outline for the approach of this presentation, we explore the nature of thought, the creation of character by way of thought, and juxtapose it with this digital age that we are living in, and what to expect as to the challenges that may bring about by the post-digital age. And so that will be our outline. And by way of reference, what I will be using would be the twin books of Annie Besant. First is the book entitled Thought, Power, Its Control and Culture. And the other reference is also by Annie Besant, Creating Character. So let us now, before we go to the presentation proper, I deemed it worthwhile. Especially, I know that there are some new theosophists engaged in their study. So let us do a brief overview of the nature of humans. And most of you are well aware of this diagram. And this diagram will be useful and instructive when we proceed in discussing thought and character building. So the human constitution is described to have a dual nature. We refer to the first aspect of this dual nature in the upper triangle. And this consists of the true self, the transcendental and transpersonal aspect, as well as the higher mental. And this consists of our higher nature. On the other hand, we have the lower triangle portrayed in red, and the characters read, consisting of the lower mental, the emotional, and the physical bodies. And on the rightmost part of the slide, this dual nature, or the self, or rather the self, is also broken down into various levels of consciousness or vehicles by which the self manifests itself, particularly in this physical environment of ours. And of course, at the top, you have the Atma. Next is the Buddhic, and then the higher mental. And similarly, at the lower part would be the lower mental, the emotional, and the physical, or the dense part of our being. The dense being the most obvious, yet illusory. This part in the lower triangle are what we call the fetters, which chains us into this world of illusion, into this world of pain and suffering. That is why we have that wheel of life, of birth, death, and rebirth into this world of illusions and sufferings. And in certain traditions, the objective is to be emancipated from these fetters or chains of the lower self, and emancipated and be born into that higher level of consciousness. Now, as we had mentioned, the lower self is illusory, and we portray just one individual in this regard. But in several theosophical literatures, we gain appreciation of the first object of the society, universal brotherhood or kinship, if we look at these levels of consciousness in this manner. Let me just. imagine that each individual or human being is portrayed by the ray of this sun or star image. There are as many rays as there are human beings. Here we only portray 4 rays. And you will note that in each ray is portrayed the lower aspect of the dual nature of humans. So the furthermost part of each ray, the tip of the triangle, would refer to the physical body. So much so that when we look at ourselves, we are physically apart. Shikar is there in Adyar. Catalina is also in India. I am here in Manila. We are physically apart. And the tips of these red triangles portray that division. And then as we go into this center, round part, we move to the emotional plane and the lower mental body or consciousness. In the purple part of this circle brings us to the higher mental level of consciousness. And it would seem that this level of consciousness, this outer ring of the circle, connects each and every one of us. Moving inwards, we find the Buddhic level, and the yellow central part is the Atma, where if we look at the diagram, we realize that ultimately, if we remove the fetters, the lower part, these red triangles, we find unity in that upper part of our consciousness, the Atmic, Buddhic, and the upper mental part, this round central figure. So we will be discussing in this part, when we discuss the nature of man, we will be discussing the intellectual part of the nature, both higher and lower mental, the intellect. So now, in studying the human nature and particularly thought, we have to keep in mind, always to keep in mind, that the living self merely wears certain garments represented by these physical, emotional, and lower consciousness. As we mentioned, these are all transient, temporary, illusory. When we die, we shed off these garments. So it is through these concepts that we better understand this thought that we will be discussing. Now, although it may appear also as reflected in the title that the emphasis is improvement of our individual character, that is not so. The theosophical study and theosophical work goes beyond. In fact, theosophical literature is not our usual self-help books on self-improvement. It is not a selfish pursuit of trying to attain nirvana or be a happy individual or acquiring certain powers and other desires. These lower purposes can never be satisfied and are part of the illusory nature of life. All earnest students desire to apply the theosophical knowledge acquired in their study, or the theoretical knowledge of theosophy, in their own evolution, in their own character building, and in helping fellow men. As we progress we will eventually realize that the development of our individual characters is but a stepping stone. And once we realize the oneness of all life, then and only then we will appreciate this part of our evolution in character building, not for individual or selfish purposes, but for that ultimate goal of oneness. Now, how do we change human consciousness as a whole? It is only when we realize our true nature, and ultimately we will gain that altruistic spirit. And it follows that after study and meditation, if the study of theosophy is true, if the meditation, the discipline and the study of meditation is true, then it will follow that the altruistic spirit of service will eventually lead us the way. So let us proceed in exploring the nature of thought. It is that aspect which leads to character development. In the slide, it tells us that the manifestation of self proceeds severally from three aspects: that of knowing, willing, and energizing, which arises the thoughts, desires, and action. Consciousness is indeed a unit, and the divisions that we made in the earlier slides are only for purposes of study and understanding these illusions. And due to the limitation of our perceptive power by the organs through which it works in the lower worlds, we have to understand this concept. So it is the self that knows, it is the self, the whole self that wills, and it is the whole self which acts. At the mental plane or mental level of consciousness, it is the self that realizes the I am. If we try to develop that thought of who am I or that I am, if we remove our name, if I remove my name, Chally Romero, does it affect that I am? No. If I change garments, does that change the I am? No. So layer by layer, we examine what is that I am. And ultimately, we realize once the self is still or passive, meaning it is quiet and receptive, it can know, it can will, and it can act. So an expression of knowing is the thought. And there is also the will or the change of intent, which translates to desires. And the outer manifestation is action when energized, when the intention is externalized. So this self that we are referring to is that conscious feeling, ever-existing one that is in each of us and who knows himself as existing, the I am. So no man has ever thought of himself as non-existent or could formulate himself as an I am not. So if you let go of everything, ultimately you will reach that concept of I am. And through the aspects of knowing, willing, desiring, and acting, we realize what is the non-self as against the self. And of course, we are referring to uh, uh, something different from when we gain transcendence. So if we perceive plants, animals, and because we know that we cannot control the movement of a plant, it is the non-self. We cannot control the arm of Shikhar because he is the non-self as against the I am. On a mirror image, Shikhar has his own I am, and because he cannot control my actions, I am his non-self. So as we live in this world of manifestation, there is that duality. And consciousness may not be able to express itself properly in the level of form. So it may need an eye to see, an ear to hear, and the senses of a dog, the acute sense of hearing and smelling, sniffing of a dog is different from the human's perception of a smell, a taste, or even seeing colors. Our eyes are limited to see only certain colors, those colors of the rainbow, but there are certain colors vibrating on different frequencies that cannot be seen by the naked eye. So the self as the knower will have this knowing of the non-self, and that relationship is knowledge. Now, that knowledge, as we had mentioned, may be distorted because we only perceive this through our certain senses. Yet, once we know the knower, the self, and the known, the non-self, and the knowing or knowledge, these three properly understood will have served its proper purpose in character building. Now, the nature of thought may be looked at in two standpoints. One side is that of consciousness or spirit, and the other side is that of form. And it is through this form that knowledge is obtained. We live in this world of manifestation where there is duality. So as we had mentioned, proper knowing might be obscured depending on our level of evolution. Now, the self as knower has its characteristic function of mirroring or reflecting or reproducing within himself the non-self. Now, if we think, if from the non-self, we find or are impressed by something that is beautiful, then it vibrates in our thoughts. And if energized, what is beautiful, what is true, then maybe if we delve into right thinking, then it provides us good character. So when we go to the creation of character, and in the book of Annie Besant, Creation of Character, it doesn't merely refer to the good or the virtuous and religious person. It refers to the aspirant who has already reached the outer court. Maybe for us, we are just outside the fence looking in. But when we talk about character building, we are talking about the aspirant who is already in the outer court. And most of you are well aware of this term. Now, how does the building of character occur? It is exceedingly deliberate. It is not a one-time thing. It is not a sometime thing done by fits and starts. It is consistent, persistent, and it is energized regularly. Now, the first motive regarding character building is to exert efforts that will have thoughts, not only on one's character, but first and foremost, its effect on others before it has an effect upon himself. Because in fact, he is qualifying for this altruistic spirit of service. Now, in the talks on occultism at the feet of the master, how do we control the thoughts? It prescribes certain things. Of course, we are able to calm the self and quiet the mind through meditation. We shouldn't keep the mind idle, but keep good thoughts always in the background. Does that mean that the mind continues to be that monkey mind with these thoughts in the background? No, it's a state of mindfulness and self-awareness where you are able to control the thoughts and this monkey mind. And also what you are doing, focus your thoughts. That is mindfulness. Do not let the mind wander. And the master also teaches us that it doesn't matter what is happening to us. Do we allow ourselves to be sad? Do we allow ourselves to be depressed? Do we let emotions of joy and elation rule our beings? No. whatever happens are the results of past action. They belong to our previous lives. We can no longer alter them, and it is useless to trouble yourself about them. So what do you think about? Think rather of what you are doing now, which will make the events of your next life, for that you can alter the now, at the now. And also, it prescribes to us that we should hold back our mind from pride, because pride comes from ignorance. The eyes, the spiritual eyes, are veiled with a lot of illusions. So even if we remove one veil, there is yet another veil by veil. Yet we shouldn't pride ourselves, because it takes a series of lifetimes to get to the feet of the master. So in choosing the thought, you either, the thoughts which you either generate or permit to come within when you are in a receptive state of consciousness. Your first motive should be the choice, which will affect those thoughts will have upon the others. Not in the first place, those which will have any effect upon yourself. So the next would be the thoughts that affect oneself as they react upon him to make his character. And also, it is prescribed that we should guard our speech. For right speech to begin with must be true, scrupulously and assuredly, accurately true. Sometimes it is difficult to determine what is true or right speech. Also, it tells us that we should form an ideal. And again, what is an ideal is an abstract way. And why do we have ideals? In the Upanishads, it tells us that man is a creature of reflection, and what he reflects upon, such as the ideal, that he becomes. Therefore, reflect upon Brahman. We should also be indifferent as to what is happening around us. The nature of indifference allows us not to be fearless. And also that nature of desirelessness is mentioned. Now, we segue a bit to what we mentioned about the digital age. And the digital age may be more pronounced at the turn of the millennium, with the internet connecting all of us. So we become a global community, as if right now we are just neighbors. The internet has connected us. But then that is the digital age. It has been mentioned that now we are entering the post-digital age. And what is this post-digital age that we can anticipate? Well, we've heard about artificial intelligence, push technology. And why do I have the image of HPB here? Well, this is part of what we can anticipate in the post-digital age with a lot of artificial intelligences. So now we see HPB apparently communicating to us, and this is brought about by virtual reality. So what is this digital age all about in relation to thought and our consciousness? Take, for example, push technology. Well, let me first ask you, for those, and I suspect most of us have our smartphones. Some of us may still have those old bar phones, but these smartphones are what we swipe left and right, up and scroll up and down. And have you experienced forgetting, leaving the house, forgetting your phone, and throughout the day, you have these anxiety attacks. You break into cold sweat and you feel tense because the phone has become an appendage of ours. Apparently, you cannot exist or survive a day without having your smartphone beside you. In fact, some of us also sleep with our smartphones beside us. And you may have noticed, discussing push technology, you may have noticed that you visited a particular website on social media, maybe about pets, and later on, you find, as you scroll down your account on social media, you have a lot of advertisements sponsored by shops selling pet products, all related to pets. And this is brought about by what we have heard about computer algorithms, artificial intelligence, and push technology. Content, media content on social media is being forced upon us. We are consuming certain content unconsciously because it is being pushed to us. And then we realize that we have these so-called influencers on social media and pause for a while and contemplate on what these so-called influencers attract you. Why do you follow them? And if our minds are open, are passive, and receptive, you can just imagine what is being offered to us on social media. If we are not mindful, if we do not have that quality of awareness, imagine what this post-digital age offers us. So the ageless wisdom and what we earlier mentioned as suggestions to thought control would still be applicable in today's age or era of digitalization, of fake news. And what I just showed you regarding that image of HPB is what is called deep fakes. If you Google deep fakes, you can see a lot of these characters coming to life, or even the living spoofed through this feature of the digital age. So why did we bring this up? Because we have to be alert, conscious, as it has been and as it should have been in the past, whether it was pre-digital age, before digital, it was analog, during industrial age, and even during the time of Anibesant. That is why we refer to it, the topics that we are studying, theosophy, divine wisdom as the ageless, as the perennial wisdom. They hold true, they are applicable in any situation that we are in. So, as we had mentioned, we come to realize that nature of thought and how it could influence our character. We have the choice either to take the right path or the left path and build on that cornerstone. Determine the direction of our thoughts, would provide the direction which the character we are building would proceed. It also provides us the foundation. Being persistent with an ideal, with good or right thoughts, would provide and deepen the foundation of the character that we are building. But what is the end of all of these? Remember that even if we look at an ideal, we have a long way to go. When we consider it an ideal, we are looking at it dimly because our consciousness in this manifestation, as we had mentioned, is beclouded by the physical, by the emotions, by the fetters we had already mentioned. But what is the end? Annie Besant tells us that the ending of that building of character, our tongues cannot yet sketch. No paintbrush, which is dipped only in earth's dull colors, can depict anything of the beauty of that perfect ideal towards which we hope to, nay, towards which we know we shall eventually rise. So, in other words, do not sweat it out. Do not fret. This is part of evolution. The past is past. What we are experiencing is karma. What we are doing now is but what we are sowing and which we will reap in our next incarnation. So with that, I thank you all for your kind attention. And again, I thank Pragya CS Studio through Brother Shikhar and Sister Catalina for this opportunity to share some thoughts, although just the beginnings of some of my musings, but hopefully this will prompt us into some discussion in the next few minutes. So thank you. Catalina, you are muted.
Okay, now. No, thank you very much, Brother Chally, for this very inspiring talk that brought us a useful and very practical approach of the ancient wisdom. And we also appreciate the presence of all sisters and brothers who have joined us on this occasion. And as Brother Charlie said, we are now we will begin our discussion. So in case you have any query, any question, any comment that you want to share with Brother Chally, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or write the comment in the chat box so we can take it up to Brother Chally. So everyone is welcome to share.
While we are waiting for some feedback from our participants,
Yeah,
of
we
course,
have oh, sorry.
we also realize that there is such a thing as collective character. So maybe character of a nation comprised of its collective citizens. Okay, go ahead, sister.
We have received in the private chat some questions. So I will, in the meantime, I will bring them up. There is one question that how can we use our power thought to help people in the present times during this pandemic situation?
Yes. Although, well, especially in the higher mental, although we find ourselves separated by lockdowns and quarantines, these are all, as we had mentioned, illusory. And should we be fearful? Maybe. But we should not let our fears get the better of us as we look at that diagram of the levels of human consciousness and that star diagram, we find that in the higher mental plane, we are one. And if we talk about consciousness at that level, we are all connected. And that is why when we have healing meditations, we should be well aware of this truth. Although some of us may not discern it, some may discern it slightly, but this is the reality. It is easier to connect with someone through this thought power rather than through the physical, where we are divided by physical walls. If you look at that outer ring of the higher mental, we are connected. So, for example, I recall an anecdote, and let's talk about artists, maybe songwriters, script writers, and we are talking about intellectual property rights, the copyright of these songs, the copyright of these stories, for example, the book Harry Potter. And sometimes there are accusations of plagiarism or copying. And maybe the one accused did not really copy or deliberately plagiarize. But it may be explained if we understand that the thoughts are connected. Those thoughts being inspired about this story, a melody, both may be attuned in that same.
Chally, please unmute your mic, Chally.
Okay, I was accidentally muted. So both may be attuned at that level of consciousness without deliberately copying each other's script or artwork, but they were attuned to that same level of inspiration, so much so that they had the same first few bars or notes to that melody or song, or that thought translated into the written word. So going back to that question, in the book, the hidden side of things and thought power, the clairvoyants can see when deliberately focused, the thought forms, and if made beneficially to benefit others, it provides a unique opportunity to provide all of these good thoughts and good vibrations to each and every other. Of course, in the mirror image, thought power can also be used for the bad side. But the fact remains that thought, and thought forms can be created, and these are very powerful.
Thank you, Brother Chally. This brings us also to another question that we have received that related specifically with all this power of thought. If so many people is sending good thoughts, why still the situation does not completely improve?
Yes. Again, if we understand karma, as we had earlier mentioned, what we are experiencing has been sown in previous incarnations, in earlier incarnations. Maybe this is a collective karma which we are reaping now. What we can only do is to contemplate and learn from this situation of ours. And in learning, then now we sow, hoping to reap the benefits in the next incarnation. Sometimes it's very difficult to provide the confidence of this pandemic and saying with confidence that this is karma, karma is all, and all is well. But for the student of the ancient wisdom, if we look and explore deeply, maybe we can still gain equanimity amidst all of these, find the opportunities, just like what we discovered. Suddenly, theosophists from all corners of the world are here discussing, exchanging ideas. I wouldn't think that we would be able to exchange ideas outside of this pandemic unless we travel to Adyar or we travel to Australia and meet Esther, for example. So this quarantine, it has provided us great opportunities. We have to be sensible. Wash your hands, physically distance yourselves, but maybe on the hidden side of things, that is what we should study. During quarantine, there's an opportunity to further still the mind, keep quiet, and maybe think about all of these things on a different perspective, on a different level.
Thank you, Brother Chally. And also, okay, we were talking about at the beginning, you are also part of the board of Golden Link College. So a question that arises here is how to take all these aspects into a practical practice or okay, aspect also into education for children and for young people. How do we build that as teachers, as parents, and as a society, of course, also?
Yes. Currently, this semester in the Golden Link College, I am teaching the subject of good governance and social responsibility. And of course, that is very practical. And in that subject, we don't talk about thought forms or all of these things that we are talking about. Of course, maybe similarly, we hold a teaching of the ageless wisdom and use certain analogies. If Jesus the Christ, during his time, talked in parables, it was because he had to be understood by the people. If he talked over the heads of the multitude, then he could have been crucified earlier. But so let's take for example in that subject, good governance. If we talk about good character, not translated into good governance, we have those aspects of accountability, of transparency. Transparency, we heard about speaking the truth. If we're talking about good corporate governance, and we're talking about the books of account for corporations, we've heard about the term window dressing. And that's just a term which makes it palatable, which makes non-transparency acceptable. So you have that concept of window dressing. For example, we have that concept of tax. I don't know in some jurisdictions, but in this legal jurisdiction of the Philippines, there is that concept of tax evasion, which is illegal. And there is that concept of tax avoidance, which is legal. So we're not talking about absolutes here, but yet we can use in everyday life these understandings of character development. If you want to be a
Okay, I guess maybe some connection problem with brother Chally. Let's wait for a couple of minutes and see if he is able to join us again. In the meantime, I also would like to invite whoever is here and wants to share some of the thoughts. I can see Professor Shinde is here today with us. Professor Shinde, is there any thought that you will share, would like to share with us today on this interesting subject that we are?
Catalina, just now you asked, so many good thoughts we are sending into the world, but still world is not what is to be expected, is not we are getting that one. It is only because we are per minute we think of 60,000 thoughts. Out of 60,000 thoughts in our mind, how many of them are positive and how many of them are negative? And I think 50%, let us take for granted, 50% are positive and 50% are negative. And again, if there are 50% positive, how many of them are selfish thoughts and how many of them are unselfish thoughts? So if we go on analyzing like this of our own thoughts, then only 5% of thoughts we are sending for the peace of the world. And remaining 75% are very much not for the peace of the world. That is why we are not progressing, or result is not seen. I think if the thought power is really working, then we are not sending the good thoughts, whatever we are expecting. That is what the thought came to me and I am shared with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shinde. Yeah, actually, we don't realize that, but when you bring us with this clarity, we realize how much we can still work and be every time aware of our own being, of our own thoughts, to really make that difference, no, that we are willing to make. Thank you very much. I don't know if someone else wants to share any thought, any comment related to this subject. Okay. Chally is joining us, so let's welcome him back since he's joining again. Let's see. It's not appearing.
My
Welcome back,
apologies,
Brother Chally.
sisters and brothers.
Okay. But now we can hear you, yes.
Okay. So anyway, as I was saying before I got disconnected, well, there is a very rich theosophical resource in translating this knowledge into, at least in that particular subject of good governance and social responsibility. If we talk about character building, and we're talking about good corporate governance or corporate social responsibilities, the CEO down the line to the staff, to the employees, will be able to affect each other, maybe in a positive way. If we start with the correct building of character. Let me just mention an anecdote.
Please.
Well, it's we have a TS member who is an entrepreneur and always would like to pay the correct taxes to the government. And usually he has difficulty because there are some, I'm not mentioning that there is a malaise in our government, but sometimes obstacles are placed so that maybe there are some bad eggs in the tax bureau. So, but he insists on paying the correct taxes, and the bureaucrats cannot get a cut. And eventually, in that tax district, the government employees realize that this guy is paying the correct taxes. So eventually, they let him be.
Okay. Is there any other comment, other question? Maybe Brother Arnie has something to share related to today's.
Thank you for getting me in. Firstly, Brother Chally, you're doing about governance. I would request you to read a book about the Tata Corporation in India. The Tatas are one of the first corporates that will be immensely helpful in the lectures. That's one aspect of it. And another thing is, it's a kind of synchronicity, because yesterday in the Blavatsky Lodge, we were precisely discussing this about thought. Actually, Pavri's book, we are covering Pavri's book. He very simply, he decodifies very simply. He says, memories translate into thoughts, thoughts translate into actions, and they manifest into the real matter in our lives. So this is the four-way process he talks about, number one. But there's more interesting story from Paramahamsa Yogananda if you read his books. He says, the very thought is the genesis of a karma. So which means, if I have an intent to do harm to X, maybe I don't do the harm physically, that itself, he says, you're creating a bad karma. So that is the power of thought as per Paramahamsa Yogananda too. So which means, that is the reason in today's pandemic world, how this Earth planet has been putrefied is because 50% due to thought forms of greed, of thought forms of aggression into nature, thought forms of environment, and let alone the actual act of being destroying the entire environment. That's another thing. But even the thought form, as you said, is the genesis of our karma. Therefore, that is the reason for meditation. That is the reason for theosophy. That is the reason that we are going the divine path. And also there are two benchmarks. What Pavri says, any thought which is in sync with divinity, and any thought which is selfless is theosophy. Very simple to understand theosophy. So whatever we think, if you're thinking in sync with divinity or in sync with selflessness or altruism, which Brother Chally talked about, well, these are the points I would like to share.
That is very well taken, Brother Arnie. I just recalled because maybe, for example, we were trained that if there is this criminal intent, which is not translated into a criminal act, then there is nothing wrong. But in the hidden side of things, it is very much wrong, as you had mentioned. No? So sometimes you have to rewire your thinking, because in school, at least in law school, that is what we were taught of, right? Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, Brother Chally. Actually, in the outer court, that is the book of Annie Besant, she mentions that is also due to the extreme subtlety of the thoughts, that they are even more powerful and more they more strong than the words of the action. So that is, as you said, a recall to be, and as Professor Shinde was saying while you logged out, that we have to be aware every single moment of the kind of thoughts and the nature of thoughts that we are having. And we are, as we told you at the beginning, we are also going live on YouTube, and there are messages thanking Brother Chally for the knowledge that you have shared today with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here in the chat and YouTube also. So thank you very much. I would love to know if maybe Sister Esther wants to share anything with us, or whoever wants to talk, because this is a really thought-provoking subject that brings us a lot of possibilities of practical application in our daily life.
I was thinking as you were talking, Chally, you were saying, you mentioned indifference, to be indifferent, but then you linked it to seeding the now. And the power is in the now, which means indifference to me doesn't mean we ignore, we become feelingless or thoughtless and never mind and get on with our business, but we actually act. And it's the moment that is the potent moment to seed the future, but not as a reaction, but as a very conscious act of, we cannot change our karma, things are karma, but each moment needs future karmas.
Yes, thank you very much, Sister, for that thought. Indeed, indifference does not mean that we let our sisters and brothers wallow in their own miseries and sufferings. Indifference is, but if we look at it as a protective shield from being sorrowful, but nevertheless, we realize our duties. So, for example, if we let this pandemic allow to take our emotions, to make us anxious, sad, depressed, then we won't be effective instruments of the masters in helping pay the karmic debt of humanity. But if we are indifferent, as I had mentioned earlier, part of this indifference makes us fearless. So maybe it is in that context also that we refer to this word of indifference, or we use the word.
Thank you, Brother Chally. And think Benny Santiago also wants to say something. Please, Brother Benny. Unmute yourself, sir.
Can I speak?
Yes, yes, please. Yeah.
As a theosophical Christian, I do believe that the power of thought manifests a lot of goodness if we follow the Christian scriptures, which said that think whatever thing is true, think whatever thing is honorable, think whatever thing is just, think whatever thing is pure, think whatever thing is lovely, and think whatever thing is good to report. And in all these things, if ever you find praise and virtue, we have to think of all these things. With that saying, I do believe it will manifest a burst of goodness to those who practice such good thought. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Santiago. By the way, indifference is also that sense of proportion when one is had a glimpse of the real with a capital R as against the illusions.
Yes, thank you. So now we are heading to the end of today's session, and just now in time, there has been a power cut here in Adyar, but anticipating that, we were using our hotspot from the mobile as the backup, so the meeting is continued and the power is back on now. So it will be soon good. So and now, since we are approaching to the end, so we would like to thank everyone who contributed to make this session a very useful and inspiring event. And we have seen in this discussion how many practical implementation aspects of this subject has come up. And our heartfelt thanks to Brother Chally, who presented a very interesting and contemporary subject in an even more simple and practical manner, making it very lucid and understandable for all of our brothers and sisters. And that too, during the time that he was very busy, as he mentioned that his lecture was planned earlier, but due to some emergencies, he could not take it up. But now he has completed his commitment, and we thank him very much for that. And it is in this reference of the subject we would recommend to use this power of thought that is inherent in all of us to generate and spread positivity, cheerfulness, and harmony for the whole manifestation. We would like to thank all our participants from all over the world who attended this session and made it a very interesting interactive session. Hope it has given some valuable pointers for implementation. We thank our technical support team and Brother Taral Munshi for his ever-ready help in every aspect. And before we move on to closing our prayers, a piece of information for all brothers and sisters that tomorrow, Sunday, we are going to have another talk, very interesting talk. Just a minute, I will share. So I was saying that there is a very interesting talk coming up tomorrow afternoon, also 5 p.m. Indian time, the esoteric aspect of Bharat Samaj Puja, that we do it here in Adyar in the Circle of Life. So please try to attend it, and it will be very interesting subject also. And in the end, we request everyone to end this meeting with a prayer for the welfare of all beings, using all our will, emotion, and our thought power. That may all beings be happy, may none fall ill, may everyone see auspiciousness everywhere, and may no one ever feel sorrow. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you once again, Brother Chally, and all the delegates for joining. If anybody wants to convey their good wishes to Brother Chally, the floor is open for everyone. And then we will end the meeting in a couple of minutes.